The Colts welcome a couple new starters to the offensive line this year. We like these guys, but can the group as a whole be trusted? Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. What is up, y'all? This is Jake Arthur and Zach Hicks of horseshoehuddle.com. I'm your resident credentialed media member for the site, and Zach is your resident film expert for the site, just cranking out content left and right. And we're here to talk to you a bit today about the Colts offensive line. Now, there's been periods of the offseason where we've talked about the depth really needs to be addressed, this and that. And we've already gone ahead and penciled in Tanner Bortolini and Matt Gonzalez as new starters. But I don't feel like we've really taken the time to talk about, like, is this group good enough? Like, should they be trusted? I think, we all like Gonzalez and Bortolini, but I think it's time to talk about the line as a whole and should we shoe them in as a good offensive line unit. So we'll go ahead and get into that today. So, Zach, obviously this is going to be a bit of a new look line this year. Ryan Kelly, after 9 years, is no longer the Colts starting center. Will Fries, after an outstanding trajectory through his first 4 years, kind of got outpriced to be able to stay with the Colts. Both of those guys moved on to the Vikings. So you still got Bernhard Raimann, you still got Quentin Nelson, and then the Braden Smith situation kind of got resolved as well. He obviously had the issues with obsessive compulsive disorder that started, that kind of went off the rails a bit late last year. He's got that kind of under control. He's back for a year. So we know those three starters, and they now welcome in Tanner Bortolini, and we assume Matt Gonzalez. So what do you think of this group as a whole? When you look at the offensive line, you look at the Colts roster, and you say, okay, the offensive line is this.
Yeah, I think when you look at this starting five, and real quick, guys, if I sound nasally, I missed all last week with this sinus infection that I'm still fighting. So this is what I'm going to sound like going forward for a little bit, like a combination of my usual voice and Chucky from Rugrats. That's what I'm going to sound like. Yeah, so, take it for what it is. But no, when I look at this offensive line going forward, I do think if we're talking about the best five from last year at their healthiest, I do think this is a step back from the best five of last year at their absolute healthiest, but it's a needed step back in order to get younger and cheaper on the offensive line. Like in the modern NFL, you can't pay all five offensive linemen. You can't be giving Ryan Kelly $10+ million a year. You can't give Will Fries nearly $20 million a year, plus Braden Smith at 20, plus Quentin Nelson at 20, and then Bernhard Raimann's coming up on a contract. So the Colts need to get younger on the offensive line. They needed to pivot away from some of these veteran players to go towards guys that they have invested top 100 or near top 100 draft picks in Matt Gonzalez and in Tanner Bortolini. So yes, I do think from best five last year to best five this year, it is a downgrade because I don't expect Gonzalez to hit the levels that Will Fries hit early last season. And I don't even know if Bortolini can hit what like Ryan Kelly was at his best last season this next year. But I do think this is a solid starting offensive line. I do have high hopes for both Gonzalez and Bortolini. And I think they can be very good players this next season with the potential to grow and be as good as what Fries and Kelly were throughout their tenure with the Colts. So yeah, I think, if you're like looking at it compared to what it looked like from day one of last year, the Colts offensive line did downgrade, so to speak, but they got younger. They're investing in these young players. And I think these guys can grow into their roles alongside good players like Quentin Nelson, Bernhard Raimann, and Braden Smith if he's able to get out there for all 17 games this year. So I don't think it's going to be some drastic drop-off that hurts the team in any way.
Yeah, and I like how you mentioned it might be an initial step back, but it was necessary to do. And they had the foresight to see this. I do think they probably thought they'd be able to retain Will Fries when you rewind a year ago, but they didn't know about Braden Smith necessarily. So you get Tanner Bortolini, you get Matt Gonzalez. Those guys are probably going to be future starters wherever on the line. So it is a means to an end to kind of see that these guys go ahead and take their lumps and get the playing time necessary, because the Colts philosophy for the most part is you got to play in order to develop. So I do think that's quite necessary. One thing I do kind of question, and the offseason isn't done. I mean, training camp's a couple months away, but do you think they did enough, I guess, either to add competition or just bolster and make sure that they were able to protect their backfield enough? Like, did they do enough to the offensive line this offseason?
I'm kind of in the middle on that, because on one hand, I do think they improved their swing offensive tackle situation, just in terms of like Matt Gonsalves was a little up and down last season as a swing offensive tackle. I didn't know how to feel about him as an offensive tackle coming into this year, if they were going to keep him out there. And then Blake Freeland, I think we all kind of know the situation there. Like it's probably not going to work out. So I do think they upgraded it by bringing in a Jalen Travis. And I also think Gonsalves projects better to being a right guard. I like Bortolini at center. They brought back Danny Pinter to solidify that backup center spot. So I don't think they didn't do like anything with the O-line. Like I think it's perfectly fine what they did. But certainly you would like to have more names behind the right guard position or left guard position that you feel more comfortable with. Or maybe even a veteran offensive tackle thrown in the mix too, just to add another name that's been there, done that. So I think there were some more moves they could have made and some moves they still can make. But I don't think that they like neglected the offensive line. Like, again, they spent a top 100 pick on Matt Gonsalves. They traded up for Matt Gonsalves in that draft, in the third round. So clearly they like this guy and he's going to get a starting spot eventually. So they had that open spot at right guard for him. He's going to get out there and get some time in. And then Tanner Bortolini had a fantastic rookie season whenever he stepped on the field. So yeah, I think they could have done a little bit more, but I like investing in these young players. And I don't think that they neglected it by any means by giving the first swing to these two players that we have high hopes for.
Yeah, I think they're kind of relative inactivity and, letting a couple starters walk out. I do think that points to them being comfortable with what they have. And I don't think it's the normal, like, neglectful part of we like our guys, so we're going to leave this position barren. Like, I think they intended to let the young guys play out after this. No, I will say for the offensive line, I think expectations, I guess, internally need to be strong because they've got this quarterback battle going on. So you have to set the table as well as possible for either Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones. I don't think it's quite as critical with Anthony because his sack avoidance is almost second to none when it comes to quarterbacks across the league. But you do want to protect his health and make sure that you've got a good offensive line out there. If he's going to get hurt, like obviously he's missed like 17 games this career. If he's going to get hurt, let it be because he's being an athlete, not because you are letting him get crushed in the backfield. And then with Daniel Jones, like, I don't think he's going to be like some awesome quarterback in the league by any means, but we've seen what it looks like for him when he has a terrible offensive line. That's been the story of most of his career in New York.
Yeah.
And then obviously we think this offense is going to be very run based. So you've got to have people out there to block for that. So, between your quarterback competition, you need to do well by them with a good offensive line. And then Jonathan Taylor, DJ Giddens, Khalil Herbert, they've got to have space to run behind. So do you like what they've got there to kind of responsibly take care of those areas?
Yeah, one thing I will say without going on like a crazy long spiel here is when I look at the change from Will Fries and Ryan Kelly to Bortolini and Gonsalves, I think you upgrade in run blocking in a way. Like I think there is room for it to be a downgrade as well. We'll talk about in the second segment how this could kind of go wrong. But I do think on paper, to me, this is an upgrade in run blocking in a sense where like Bortolini is this one-of-one athlete at center. Like Ryan Kelly was a fantastic athlete. But when we're talking about 30-plus-year-old Ryan Kelly versus 22-year-old Tanner Bortolini, Bortolini is a way better athlete and can make these blocks that Kelly just can't make anymore. And then you look at Gonsalves where, like, yes, I think Fries was an awesome pass blocker last year and just a fantastic player in that regard. But I think Gonsalves has more punch and more just pop potential as a run blocker, especially on these gap and power runs where the Colts were really running behind him last season. So if we're looking at this Colts team next year and how they're going to be successful, It's probably not going to be through the air. They are going to be a run
Mm,
first football team this next season. I think a lot of their offseason moves have kind of predicated that by going and getting a tight end early who can run and block, like Tyler Ward, by investing in backup running back, by putting a 6'6", 330-pound Gonzalez at right guard. Like, this team is committing to running the football. And I think these two players do offer a bit more for the offense in terms of the run game. I think it will be a bit hit or miss in pass protection, but Bortolini certainly isn't as big at center, so there will be some times that bull rushes knock him back. Gonzalez has some leverage issues, which we'll talk about in a second, that could give him some issues on the interior. But I think when we're looking at like the run game, these two players offer a little bit more than Kelly and Fries even as run blockers. And I think, look, when this Colts team, how are they going to potentially make the playoffs this year? It's going to be through running the football. And I think these two players do kind of add to their ability to run the ball next season.
well, that is certainly good news. And like you mentioned, we will talk more about Gonzalez, Bortolini, and an even newer face, Jalen Travis, in just a moment. Zach, I'm going to need you to say goodbye to sticky notes, scribbled plans on the fridge, and overlapping calendar invites. And that's because Skylight Calendar is here to bring clarity to the chaos and help families stay organized without the stress. This sleek digital display syncs with your existing calendars, Google, Apple, Outlook, and more, making it simple to track appointments, practices, dinners, and reminders all in one easy-to-see place. I know for me personally, my wife and I run solely off of a digital calendar. You know, we share a Google Calendar. You know, when you do that with the rest of your family as well, if you've got a big, close family, everyone's always asking you what you're doing. You know, getting a digital calendar like this can be super, super helpful to not have to answer questions all the time. You know, you don't have to ask people what they're up to, this and that. It just makes things way, way easier. I personally do not proceed throughout a week without having everything on a calendar because that is just how I function now. So right now, Skylight is offering our listeners $30 off of their 15-inch calendars by going to skylightcal.com/NFL. Go to skylightcal.com/NFL for $30 off of your 15-inch calendar. That is skylighthtcal.com/NFL. All right, Zach. So obviously this is going to be not your older brother's offensive line for the Colts. Again, Ryan Kelly, after 9 years, is no longer the starter. And then Will Fries was about 2.5 years as the starting right guard. So
yeah,
we got some new faces here. So Tanner Bortolini is going to get his first extended run as a starter. Now, they did give him a little bit of time there, but then I think he had a concussion last year, and they moved into Danny Pinner for whatever reason and just kept it going instead of the guy you knew was part of your future just going with it. I digress, whatever. And then Matt Gonzalez, super limited action as a guard. One snap in relief of Quentin Nelson last year, but throughout most of college as well has been a tackle.
Yep.
And then we'll welcome in Jalen Travis as well. Him and Blake Freeland will kind of duke it out to be the swing tackle. I mean, there has to be a winner there. But that flexibility to bring in Travis did kind of give the Colts the flexibility to move Matt Gonzalez to guard, because before they weren't going to be able to do that because you couldn't just solely trust Blake Freeland to do it. So what are you expecting out of these newer guys? I mean, what I guess is the ceiling in 2025, and then is there any reason for concern going in?
Yeah, so let's start with Gonzalez because he's the guy who I wrote about recently for Horseshoe Huddle on my summer scouting series. Talked about his move to right guard, and it was actually really funny. I was expecting to see more guard snaps in his history, just based off his size profile. Does kind of seem like it could be just like a big guard. I know a lot of 6'6" players get put out at tackle, but no, only 45 career snaps since 2019 on the interior. Every other snap in his career has been on the outside. I think like 2019 is where he played like his most career interior snaps, and it was like 30 in a season. So he has barely played on the inside in his career, but I do think a lot of his traits do project fairly well to guard. He's got a lot of power in him. He's a great size, really explosive player. He really worked on his first punch last year, which he used to kind of mitigate some of his leverage concerns. And I think when you look at his best best moments as a pass blocker last year, which weren't really many because he had a lot of struggles as a pass blocker. A lot of those best moments came when he could just get on players in a hurry, use his length, use his size to establish that first contact and then just win from there. So I do think a lot of where he won last year translates well to a guard. He was also a fantastic puller, operated well at the second level. So it gives the Colts another element there. But there are some issues with this move. Again, only 45 career snaps since 2019. This going back to his early days of college playing on the inside. And we don't see many 6'6" guards because of the leverage issues, because you're going against these 6'2", 6'3" defensive tackles who are 300 something pounds. And if they're going to out leverage you, they're going to push you around. So he's got to find a way to mitigate that concern. He's not going to become this super flexible, bendy, shorter player overnight. He's got to find a way to win in spite of that. And I think one thing that he did last year really well was working on that first step and that first punch so he could displace guys quickly off the line and then just kind of win from that connection right there. So I do think we're going to see more of like a 2023 Will Fries type season from him where, we're looking at the Pro Football Focus grades at the end of the year and it's like 55s to 60s across the board, just like average to above average. But honestly, when we're talking about a guy making this move with his size profile and with some of the things he needs to work on, I think that'll be a productive season for him. Just be an adequate starter in his first year at the position and grow from there like we saw from Will Fries. That's kind of my expectations for him this season, and I fully expect him to hit that. Like, I think he's going to be a perfectly fine starter for the team. And maybe that's not, like, maybe as your third round pick that you traded up for, you want him to be even better in his first year starting, but like, when you have a line of Quentin Nelson and Bernhard Raimann on one side, like if you can just give me a solid starting guard on the right side, like I will take that 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, for this Colts team.
Yeah, I was going to say last year when the right guard spot was playing just adequate, the offensive line was really, really good. It wasn't until Dalton Tucker kind of petered off and then the quick Mark Glowinski magic faded that the offensive line really started to look ugly.
Right.
When they just looked baseline fine, the offensive line was doing really, really well. And I think that's all you really need from him this year. Again, you mentioned the mobility and being inside will, I think, allow him to get that first punch that you mentioned. And then when it comes to Bortolini, this is obviously not a career projection by any means, but like when I think of some things that like I obviously don't have a ton of I haven't seen the Eagles like a ton, but when I think of like Jason Kelce and some of the things that made him a really effective center, he could get out and move better than any other center. And then he just latched onto guys and paved a way and did not allow anyone to get past him to the ball. And I think Bortolini, you mentioned he's like a one-of-one athlete. He kind of offers us a skill set like that where he moves really well out in space. And then if he can just bump up his play strength, I think is probably one thing that needed to be juiced up a little bit going into year 2. If he can get his play strength up, then he could be really, really effective for a scheme that I think is probably going to try and create a little space in the run game a little bit. So I think Bortolini's got a really, really high ceiling. Again, Jason Kelce's a Hall of Famer. I'm just thinking stylistically that portion of their game kind of reminded me a little bit.
Yeah, there's been this move in recent NFL to just move towards these super athletes at center. And we've seen some varying degrees of success across the NFL. You have, for every Jason Kelce, you have like a Garrett Bradbury, who's been an adequate starter in his career, but certainly didn't live up to his first round billing when he got drafted by the Vikings years ago. And it led to him, I think, being released this offseason. But I do think he falls in that same tier of player in terms of just super athlete. And again, the range between Kelce and Bradbury is essentially your play strength and how you win alongside being a great athlete. Because yes, you can make every block in the world with his athleticism, but you have to be able to hold up at the point of attack. You have to be able to withstand power rushes on the interior, keep that dish clean, have good eyes. I think he can do all those things. And I saw enough flashes on his film last year to where I'm very, very optimistic about his future. I think this can be a top 10 center in football with the right just work around him and just with the right development plan for him. So I'm honestly way more optimistic about Bortolini than I am about, I think, any other rookie from last year's class for the Colts. More optimistic even than like Latu and AD Mitchell. in Bortolini, because some of the flashes that you could see on his film is just top end type stuff. So yeah, it's going to take some time. And I think there are some concerns with his wingspan and with his overall length. And he's going to have to find ways to work around that and maybe, get some wrestling background type stuff in there to survive with the shorter wingspan. But again, this is a one-of-one athlete who showcased some really good things on film last year, got better throughout his starts. Like, I think this is going to be the Colts starting center for the next 10 plus years. Like, he's only 22 years old too. He's only going to get better with more playing time. Tony Sperano Jr. loves him. I'm head over heels for Bortolini as well on film. I think he's going to be a really good player for the Colts.
Yeah, I did think that was interesting. They got the two offensive linemen mid rounds last year. They went for Gonzalez first, traded up for him, but it really felt like Bortolini was the one with the super high ceiling.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Coming up next, is there anything they still need to do? Is this group good enough to where they need to do anything else before training camp happens? We'll talk about that in just a moment. All right, so the biggest depth piece that the Colts did this offseason, so they re-signed Danny Pinter, which I think that's fine. I think when he has to come in and start a couple games at center throughout his career, he's been good. Don't move him to right guard. We've seen that's not good. But, if he's going to be your backup center, I'm totally fine with that. Jalen Travis comes in, 4th round. I really like the upside there. Usually guys with that size, what is he, like 6'8", 340 or 330, something like that?
Yeah.
A behemoth. Those guys don't always move that well. But he's actually got pretty nimble feet. He's got a basketball background. He's actually played at a pretty high level. In high school, was a part of some really impressive AAU teams. So there's some good upside there with Jalen Travis. And it really needs to work out between him and Blake Freeland as your backup tackles. Because if you make that commitment to move Matt Gonzalez to right guard, if you don't like what those two other guys offer you at tackle, well, now you're kind of screwed a little bit, because you really don't want to upset the apple cart by then taking away Gonzalez and moving him back to tackle for something, because then what do you do at guard? It just creates kind of a network of issues there. So with that said, I think the depth at guard could use a little bit more, because right now you're looking at Dalton Tucker, and he was fine for a rookie undrafted guy last year until he wasn't. When he immediately stepped in for Will Fries, I think he played better than you would expect. But then when he had to play for an extended period of time, he had to be replaced. Yeah. But you can assume a natural progression, at least by a little bit there. And then Josh Sills, you probably could avoid that. He's been around for a couple years, but they haven't really wanted him to be out there.
Yeah.
So you look at that, and I think I would welcome a very mid to low level guard signing, someone you don't really expect to start, but has probably done it before.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree whatsoever there. I did want to touch on Jalen Travis, though, because we didn't get to hit on him in the last one. I'm pretty optimistic about Travis overall. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that I think this is going to be like an all-pro caliber player. I do think there are limitations. Very stiff player, doesn't turn super well, but that height, weight, speed combination that he has, along with his explosion, and honestly some development in his pass sets as well, and also in his hands, I think he can be the starting right tackle going forward after this upcoming season. And I feel better about where he's starting from going into this next year than I did about Blake Freeland. Even Blake Freeland as a rookie, and Blake Freeland even right now. So I do feel pretty good about the swing tackle situation, because Jalen Travis's film is pretty darn good at Iowa State. I understand why he was available where he was, because he was like an older player that only had 1 year of FBS play under his belt, and there are some stiffness in his game. But I do think you get a really high floor with him. When it comes to backup guard, though, again, I'm not completely out on Dalton Tucker. I do think his overall play got bashed a little bit too hard last year, considering that like his first game or two were actually pretty solid. It was just like the final 3 were just a train wreck. But he was an undrafted free agent starting in the NFL in his first year. Like, he just shouldn't have been put in that situation. So I do think he can grow into being a backup caliber player, but like, do we feel good about that going into next season? I'm not sure about that. And you have a couple names here that you have listed. And honestly, I agree. Like, I wouldn't mind bringing them in. And look, if Tucker beats them in camp, cool, give Tucker the backup right guard spot. But I want Tucker to have to beat somebody other than Josh Sills to earn that backup spot. I'm all for Tucker being the guy if he wins it, but I want him to actually win it in camp, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm trying to prepare for the disaster scenario where there's like multiple starters down. And I think I'm okay with Tucker being the backup in one of the guard spots, but then you want another option as well that's not just Josh Sills. And so I was looking around. I want guys who aren't like super old. They're not at the tail end of their careers, which Mark Glowinski is a guy I would consider, but he is like 33. But we've seen him recently play decent ball in a small sample size. Like, I think he could get you a start or two if you needed it.
Yeah.
But there's guys like Daniel Brunskill, who was with the Titans, Tristan Colon Castillo, who was with the Cardinals. Those are guys who have played a lot of ball. They don't really go into their season as a starter, but whether it's because of injuries or just really poor play ahead of them, they have played a lot of football and they've played pretty well. So I'm always kind of opposed to like bringing in starting level guys as backups because number one, who wants to do that? And number two, you probably have to pay too much. So guys like that who are kind of low, mid-level veteran signings, like I'm totally good with that. I think I'd bring in one more guy. So I know there's always people talk about like Dalton Reisner, Will Hernandez. I think John Feliciano is out there as well. So like really well-known guys, Brandon Sheriff as well. Would you consider any of like the bigger name guys? Because that seems like they'd be coming in to compete to start.
Yeah, I think if there were an injury in camp, I think for sure.
Yeah.
Like if, knock on wood, because God, please don't let this happen. But like if Gonsalves were to get hurt in minicamp, or even if it was something like Jalen Travis got hurt in minicamp and you had to move Gonsalves back out to be the swing tackle, like or something like that, or another Braden Smith situation happening. Like you never know what's going to happen in the NFL. So you want to have that relationship with those free agents just in case. But as it stands right now, I'm fine with giving Gonsalves and Bordellini that first shot, other than getting like a Sheriff in here. Because like even if a Sheriff gives you a higher floor than a Gonsalves, you're not really learning much about your team going forward for them. Mm-hmm. I mean, again, you might be helping your quarterback for one more year, which might be enough for the Colts. So maybe that can make some sense. But at the end of the day, it's about asset management and getting Gonsalves on a couple more years of a rookie contract as your starting right guard. It's way more valuable to find out if he can do that than getting Sheriff in here to be a below average starter for a season, for instance. So yeah, I would much rather just give Gonsalves the first shot. And look, if he's terrible, then you can go back to these guys. Like they're still out there for a reason, and they still probably will be for a little bit here.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm all for seeing what the young guys got. Now, with that said, talking about the future, there are two more offensive line moves I would look to do over the next year. Now, don't wait. I would sign Bernhard Raimann to an extension.
Yeah.
Left tackles, starting tackles in general aren't getting any cheaper. I mean, you're looking at $20 million for this guy, I'm sure, per year. So do it now. Because again, look at what the Cowboys do. Look at what the Bengals do, where they wait way too long and their guys get way more expensive. The Colts have, I don't think they've had this problem with waiting too long. I think they do reward guys when needed, which makes me think an extension is, I mean, it's got to come sooner rather than later, right? Like with guys like this who are so very clearly part of the future, I don't think they make them sweat much. Like I think they get it done. And then Quentin Nelson has an extra year left, whereas Bernhard is a free agent next year. Quentin, I think, is signed through 2 years. So, I mean, still, that's a guy who you want to finish his career in Indy. So they don't need to do it now, but like next year, I would look into extending Quentin as well.
Yeah, Nelson, I think you can let that wait until, because his value is just not going to go any higher. He's already like a top five.
He's already a Hall of Famer, yeah.
But he's already like a top 5 highest paid guard. It's like the value is not going up that much higher, for him. Like you're gonna be paying him top of the market regardless. Mm-hmm. The only thing that could happen with his value is it goes down if he suffers some injuries. So that's why you want to wait on that one and just not rush that. Raimann, though, the floor is set. It can only get higher from here, because if he makes a Pro Bowl this next season, for instance, which he's kind of been close to it in his career so far, like he's been a fringe Pro Bowl starting left tackle for the Colts the last couple seasons. It really has just been health and kind of consistency there for him. If he hits it this year, like if he just has a fully healthy season, other guys get hurt and he gets a Pro Bowl, you're looking at like a $24 million per year contract, maybe $25 million per year contract, Whereas right now you could probably get him in that 20 to 22 per year. And that's money that you could save on the long term right now. Like, look, Bernhard Raimann, if he were to hit the open market, would probably be the best left tackle to touch the open market that was under like 35 years old in like 15 years. Like, these guys of his caliber don't hit the open market pretty much ever. So the Colts are probably not going to let him touch the market next offseason, but you want to extend him as early as possible so you can keep that price tag down. I think as of right now, you could probably get him done for what, like 4 years, like $80 to $88 million, and again, you could structure that in different ways. I'm assuming you can get him like right around that Garrett Bowles type number. But again, if he comes out and has a Pro Bowl type year, you're probably looking at like a top 3 left tackle contract, because that's just the nature. People are so desperate for offensive tackles, and he'd be, a 29-year-old starting left tackle in the NFL, 28-year-old starting left tackle. So yeah, get that done as soon as possible. I think there are conversations to be had about other extension candidates for the Colts. Like, I'm fine with waiting on Alec Pierce, fine with waiting on like Nick Cross and other guys that the Colts could extend this offseason. But Bernhard Raimann, like, look, if you get a starting left tackle in the NFL that even gives you average play over the course of 2 seasons, which in my opinion, Rymann's given them above average play the last 2 years, sign him as quick as possible, because you're not going to find that. They got lucky to find Raimann in the 3rd round a couple years ago. Don't tempt fate. Just get that signing done, get him locked up until his age 34th season or whatever it is, and just don't have to worry about left tackle going forward.
Yeah, I have zero fear about him hitting the open market, because they'll get it done. It's just, like you said, the price is only going to go up, so I would do it now. Like, they kind of lucked out getting Michael Pittman where they did. They signed him, and then like 5 to 10 guys signed extensions across the league after him, which would have driven up his price. So, like, don't make that happen. Just do it now. Like, set the market. And again, they're going to get it done. It's just up to them how much it costs them. And they have the money. That's why you let Ryan Kelly leave. That's why you let Will Fries leave, because that money's going to go elsewhere. But yeah, they've got to do that one. And I just would not wait much longer. I think now that everyone's reconvened, we're in OTAs, you got mini camps coming, like, just do it. Just hammer it out.
Yeah, if you guys want to see something funny, go look at all of the top offensive tackle contracts in the NFL, or just who the top offensive tackles are in the NFL. Outside of Jordan Mailata and I guess the pair of Bills tackles that they have, who are both outside of 1st-round picks, they're basically all 1st-round picks at offensive tackle. So the Colts getting a player of Rymann's caliber, where they got him in the draft, and for him to be this level of player, get the contract done. Let's lock him up. Don't worry about that anymore. It's always nice when you don't have to worry about offensive tackle. Remember the 1 year we didn't have a Costanzo or Raimann starting at left tackle for the Colts? Yeah. Eric Fisher, or I guess 2 years, right? Fisher, Pryor, and LaRaven Clark got some starts in there.
That's right.
Jared Valdir came out of retirement for a couple starts. Like, don't mess with this. Please don't ever let me watch that again.
You don't want to be in tackle hell. Again, they're not going to let it happen, but don't tempt fate here.
Yes. Please don't. Please don't. But guys, we want to thank you for making Locked On Colts your first listen today and every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. If you guys want to become a Locked On Colts insider and chat with us directly and get that insider scoop, follow the link in our show notes. And if you don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, at Zach Hicks2, all on Twitter. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings, reviews as well. Have a great day, and we will see you back here tomorrow afternoon.